Hi there. Welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast with Lisa Schlossberg. I'm your host, Lisa Schlossberg, a licensed social worker, certified health coach, personal trainer, and yoga instructor. If you, like I have, struggle with your relationship with food, eating, and body image, I am here with this podcast to guide you into healing the relationship you have with yourself through a trauma-informed, holistic, and mind-body-soul approach. Together, we can support you in building a lifestyle of more peace, freedom, safety, and power. Hello, friend. Welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast. This is your host, Lisa Schlossberg. And before we get into the episode, I wanted to share an announcement with you about what to expect from this podcast over the next however many weeks this goes on for. What I want to let you know off the bat is that these episodes are now going to be coming out every consecutive week instead of every other week. I have been a mix of inspired and motivated by how many ideas and thoughts I've had that really want to be shared. And I have also been inspired by all of the very positive feedback that I have received after the first couple of episodes. And so I'll be honest with you, over the last couple weeks, or definitely the last few days, I've been kind of back and forth wavering between, I kind of want these to come out every week because it feels like, that there's just so much momentum and energy around it. And I also didn't want to necessarily put that kind of pressure on myself, because these are all solo episodes. And then in my meditation this morning, I just got a very strong fuck it, let's do it kind of feeling. So that's what we're doing. So for the next few weeks, and again, I don't know how many episodes this is going to be. I don't know how long this solo monologue will go on for, but at least I can tell you the next, let's say, couple of months, most likely, there will be an episode every single Monday. So I hope that that's good news for you. I hope you're enjoying this so far, and stay tuned because I do think it continues to get real juicy. So as always, send me your questions, thoughts, feedback, ideas, responses, anything you want to share. I would love, love, love to hear it. And again, I hope you enjoy. Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Out of the Cave podcast. This is me, your host, Lisa Schlossberg, and we are back for another solo episode today. I just finished listening to the last two episodes myself because it really honestly all came out of me so naturally, organically. I don't want to say mindlessly, but it just came out of me to the point where I was like, I need to re-listen to that and make sure that I'm not going to say all the same things over again. And so after listening to that, what I want to start this episode with is saying, at the end of the last one, I said, this is all, I said a lot, but this is all still like the tip of the iceberg. And having listened to all of it and sat with it, and I've been taking notes and like jotting things down over the last couple of weeks, what I realized is it's kind of like those first two episodes are almost like the introduction to a book, or like an introduction where I've outlined kind of the high level overview. And what I really want to do is use this episode and the next few, I still don't know how many it will end up being, to delve way deeper into a lot of the things that I mentioned. So taking baby steps, the discipline of doing less, tender self-compassion, fierce self-compassion, intentional weight loss, psychic abilities, like all the things were mentioned, but it felt like they were kind of breezed over because there's so much that I want to say about all of them. So that's how the next few episodes, including this one, are going to go, is I want to slow it down. And ultimately, it feels to me like this is providing me an opportunity to step into really teaching. There's a lot that I want to teach about how this works and why it's working and things like that. And that just feels really appropriate because, as I've been alluding to, there's been a lot of change and transition and growth and evolution personally, professionally. And one of those things is that I find myself very aligned with and excited about being a teacher. I think if you have been in my group coaching program at some point over the last few years, you have seen that in me. If you've been at the retreats and things like that. And it feels like, I don't know, I don't like, there's a part of me that's like, I don't want to speak too soon, but that's what I see myself stepping into a lot more, especially once I have a doctorate. So we're getting there, but that's kind of the energy of how I'm coming into this. Is there's so much I just want to teach you. So that's what I'm going to do. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being on this journey with me, and buckle up. Okay, so the first thing that started to occur to me that I was reflecting on when I was listening to the last two episodes, and it's not really related to anything, but it feels like an important reflection, that there was a period of time a couple of years ago where I felt really depressed. I felt really depressed. And it just felt like a really dark, bleak time in my life. And very contrary to what I've been experiencing recently, where, I get out of bed and I have so much energy and I'm so excited and I'm happy and all of these things. It was like the complete opposite of that, where I would wake up in the morning with just this like dread and heaviness and fear and numbness. And I remember saying to my cousin at the time, it might have also been around Thanksgiving or the holidays, but years ago, because I remember saying to her that I was holding out hope, or some part of me had this belief that if it was this dark and this scary and this bad and bleak and depressing now, I have to believe that it's going to get really good and it's going to be really bright, and it's going to turn around at some point somehow. How? I don't know. When? I don't know. But I don't even know that I would have called it a knowing, but there was a knowing in me at the time, just a belief that things were going to eventually balance themselves out. And I don't know how I held on to that or what inspired me to know that, but I've been thinking about that a lot lately, where there's a part of me that looks back and is like, we made it. We made it. We made it here to where we knew at some point we would make it. We knew that this would happen. And I don't know, it just feels like, I guess if there's anyone that is listening to this that, especially around this time of year, is going through it, just hang in there. Hang in there. And that is always true. But I say that from this place of really feeling like I've gotten to the other side. And I also share that because, like I said in my last episode, I've never experienced life this way. This is new to me. I remember in the past when people would talk about gratitude, be grateful, be grateful, be grateful, practice gratitude. And I would always be like, for what? For what? And then when people would say, like, your human life, that you're here on earth, like the gift of the human experience. And my reaction to that for a very long time was like, I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask to be here. I didn't, what's the alternative to being here? Not being here? That feels kind of better, I would imagine sometimes. And that was always like my relationship with it. And so now I'm in this place where I like wake up and I'm grateful that I get to live a life and I'm excited about it and, all the things. And it just feels really, again, important to acknowledge and honor that not only did I not always feel this way, but in fact, there were chapters of my life where I felt so, so, so far from this place. And I feel like you should know that. So anyway, that's what I was thinking about, was like, oh my God, if I could hear myself say where I'm at now years ago, part of me would feel validated, like I knew it. I knew it wasn't going to look this bad forever. And part of me would just feel such a deep exhale and relief that it does get better. It does get better. So anyway, all right, I wanted to start there. Now, let's take a deep breath and put that aside. Let's get back to the fact that you're a spiritual being. Like, how many times can I say that? Don't know. Someone should tally it. We can make a drinking game out of it, or some sort of game. Okay, you're a spiritual being having a physical experience with an animal brain in a social context, and you survive on food. Now, the reason that I want to go back to this is because I've been thinking about how I believe, okay, we've all talked about how diet culture can be very harmful for a lot of reasons. And I find that that conversation often focuses on, of course, naturally, the relationship we have with food. And we can talk at length about how the impact of diet culture influenced our relationship with food in negative ways and harmful ways and somewhat toxic and abusive ways. Sure, all of that is true and real and valid and important to look at. And my belief and feeling is that if we are always talking about how diet culture ruined our relationship with food, we're not addressing what I think is the most harmful impact, which is almost the severing that happens between our mind and body and soul because of diet culture in a way that sure is about food, but impacts us way, way, way deeper than that. So, for example, what I mean by this is, and I'll use myself and my experience as the example, when I wanted to lose weight, even though my weight loss originally was motivated by wanting to, fit into the world, into seatbelts and roller coasters and chairs and cars and things like that. And it wasn't, and I say that because it wasn't like really driven by, the way people are judging me or like things like that. And there's that component to it. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is because even though I didn't feel especially driven by the social context to lose weight, I did find myself embodying the approach that was very self-neglectful. So when my body was hungry, I did not feel like I was allowed to eat because my goal was weight loss. And when my body was tired, I did not allow myself to rest because the goal was weight loss. The goal was to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And in order for me to do that, the way that I learned how to do it, eat less, exercise more, it's that simple, was to really push down, repress, deny parts of myself and ultimately my body and the voice speaking through my body, my soul, this is what I need, was all ignored and denied. And so when I say the harmful effect of diet culture, conditioning, I'm not just talking about what it did to your understanding, perception of a relationship with food and eating. I am focusing now on a deeper level on what it did to your relationship with yourself and your body. And when I say, again, your relationship with yourself, I'm talking about the spiritual dimension. I'm talking about you being severed from your spiritual self because of how strong the conditioning around your body was. And not just the conditioning around your body, but your perception of yourself as a body. You objectifying yourself as a body and only seeing yourself as physical because of the animal brain living in a social context. That's what we learned. That's what we internalized. And then we started living that way. So when we were hungry, we didn't eat. When we're tired, we don't rest. When we're thirsty, we don't hydrate. We have all these needs. When we're lonely, when we're bored, when we're like, all of these things are playing out. But because of the influence of diet culture, a lot of us can't hear those voices. And if we do hear them, we are much more likely to deny and repress and avoid and suppress them than to actually honor them. So then we grow up many, many, many years of living this way, and it becomes more habitual. Dr. Gabor Mate talks about this. It becomes more habitual for us. It's not our first nature, but it becomes our second nature to live in the world so disconnected from ourselves. And so I think that this is really important, again, because yes, we can talk about the harms of diet culture, but we have to see it from this lens. Because if we talk about, the harmful impact of diet culture, and then we work on healing the relationship with food, that's great. But we're still not getting to the depth that we need for real, like, holistic healing that will then again connect you to your actual intuition to support you with intuitive eating. Because it's not about food and eating. It's about the relationship you have with yourself that then translates into your relationship with food and eating. And so if we address you actually getting back in touch with your body, connecting the mind to the body so the gates of the soul open, then your soul and your intuition can speak through your body, and you can access intuitive eating because you're accessing intuitive living. But that's, again, it's like this whole kind of restructuring and rewiring of what the problem actually is so that we can address the solution on a deeper level that will actually get to the root of it, right? So it's not just the mindset and the emotions around food and eating. It is the soul level experience of being a spiritual being that has everything to do then with you surviving on food with an animal brain in a social context. So I hope that makes sense, but I think we have to really start there and talk about that, because in order for us to work our way back into the body, to ourselves, the question becomes how and when and why and with whom did we become so disconnected in the first place? And I see diet culture as the culprit of that mind, body, soul fragmentation for so many people. So I'm going to just leave that there for now. Because also the other way to look at this or think about this is, what might it have been like, or what could it have been like if you didn't have the diet culture conditioning? And the same could be said for like the hustle culture of kind of always doing a lot and, like I'm going to just say hustle culture because there's more I want to say about that later. But that's how we can think about it, right? Is like if we didn't, and this also, the important thing about this is I'm not blaming, I'm not shaming, I'm not judging diet culture. I'm reflecting and practicing discernment around what was helpful, what was harmful in my relationship with myself. But I say that because the energy of shaming and blaming and it's all diet culture's fault, that's not helpful. That's actually not helpful. But if we look back and say, oh, okay, well, this had this impact and this had this effect on me. Now I see how I arrived here as an adult where I have no idea how to listen to my body. I don't ever even feel hunger and fullness. Like, in order for us to know how to get out, we have to know how we got here. That's the root of the whole group coaching program. But so when it comes to this, one way to look at it is, again, what might, and we'll never know the answer to this, but what might my relationship be with my own body and with my own self if I felt safe to eat when I was hungry and stop when I was full all those years ago, when it started feeling like I shouldn't do that, or I can't do that, or I'm not supposed to do that, or it's bad to do that. If those messages were never internalized, again, go deeper than what it did to your relationship with food. Go deeper. What did it do to your relationship with yourself? And that's what we want to pay attention to. Because if we can do something about those voices and those tendencies and those instincts to ignore, suppress, deny ourselves, now we can intuitively eat. Okay. All right. So that feels important. But the other thing about it is just to, again, acknowledge the nuance that exists here is, I think there are very valid reasons that we don't actually want to be this deeply connected to ourselves. Because, like I said in, I think it was the first episode, sometimes you have to break your own heart to save your soul. You have to be brave enough to break your own heart. And because we contain multitudes, because we have many parts, we have a mind, we have a body, we have a soul, we have a social context, we have the animal brain. Like, there's all the inner child, the inner teenager, there's all these parts of us. Because we contain multitudes, I think it's valid to acknowledge that sometimes when your soul knows something, it knows what is in alignment with you and what isn't. It knows what is for your greater good. It knows what's coming from the higher self. There is very valid resistance because you also have an animal brain that likes safety. It likes familiarity. It likes comfort, right? So what happens, if you're anything like me anyway, is that sometimes your soul, knowing your body is speaking to you because your soul is speaking through your body, right? Your soul, you live in a body. You are the soul. Your soul speaks through your body. Sometimes the feeling, the sensing is, I know that this is what I have to do. I know that this is what's right. But then there are so many parts of me that are like gripping to the lifestyle or the paradigm or the habit that I don't want to let go of. I don't want to say goodbye to this thing. And so there's this tension that exists. And this is why it's so crazy to be a human being. This is why it's so crazy to me to be a spiritual being having a physical experience with an animal brain in a social context, because I actually constantly feel like I know what's right for me, but shit, I don't want to have to go through what I have to go through to actually make that decision or honor that or commit to that. And so I think that there are very valid reasons that we want to be in our bodies, and we want to feel peaceful in our skin, and we want to feel at home, and we want to feel safe, and we want to feel like an intuitive being. We want all of this. And I think it's important to acknowledge, just like with anything else, when there's a part of you that wants it and is moving toward it, there is always necessarily a part of you that is moving away from it and doesn't want it. Because again, familiarity is comfort. The brain, the animal survival brain, will always choose the familiar hell over the unfamiliar heaven. And so if, and I use this example not just with like relationships, but jobs and cities, right? It's like, I think about leaving San Diego. I loved it out there. I really did. And I loved my apartment. I loved where I lived. I loved the city. I loved it. And at the time, I remember feeling on a deeper level. And I also, sidebar, I've been thinking not randomly. I mean, this is what goes through my head all the time. But I've been thinking recently about how the English language, or language in general, feels so limiting because we're energetic beings. To be honest, I had this thought for the first time once when I was on shrooms, but I still think about it all the time. How we're spiritual, energetic beings. But then our challenge is to constantly be taking this entire energetic experience and then translating it into language, into words. And so much of what we feel and experience, by the way, is in the pre-verbal part of the brain. And so it's like, we can't ever be with language fully expressed. That's a personal opinion. We need, I think, also some of the more right brain, like art and music and color and sound, things like that, because we're always limited by language. But the reason I say that here is because I've been thinking about how so much of this experience is like this knowing and sensing on a soul level, but I don't know. I mean, feel free to write me an email if you're like, actually, Lisa, you're just forgetting about a word that exists. I haven't asked ChatGPT about this yet, but I keep thinking about how it's like, how do I talk about that? Because feeling, right? It's like, I have a feeling, and it's like, well, feeling we also use for emotion. Well, I have a sensing. Okay, that's closer, right? I have a knowing. Well, we also use the word knowing for like intellectual knowing. So how do I capture in language the distinction that is, it's not feeling like emotion, it's not knowing like intellect, it's a sense, it's a sensing, it's a, I don't know what it is, right? But anyway, all of that to say, let's come back from the sidebar that I had this knowing, I'll use that for lack of a better word, that it was time for me to leave San Diego. And when I knew that and felt that, it was like, but I love San Diego. I don't want to move. I feel like I just got here. I thought I was going to spend my life here. But I have this and I have that, and this is good and this is good. And oh my God, I loved my apartment so much. And there were so many things that happened for me. And at the end of the day, it was this, I have to break my heart to save my soul. I have to leave this city because I just know that I'm supposed to. And in order for me to honor that, in order for me to move in the direction of alignment on a soul level, I have to tolerate grief. I have to tolerate pain and heartache. I have to tolerate losing this entire life that I was building out here, right? And I have to just be willing to do that. So it's not comfortable and it doesn't always feel good and it can be very emotional. But if you, again, are only understanding yourself as a physical being that also sometimes has feelings, you're still not getting to the fact that you're a spiritual being and sometimes you know things and are guided to do things that are not in alignment with how you feel emotionally, because it's how you feel spiritually. And so I'm saying this because we could talk all day about how you want to be in touch with your intuition. You want to tap into your own psychic abilities. You want to experience intuitive eating. Well, you have to know that it can be very uncomfortable emotionally to do what you got to do to get there. And I think, for what it's worth, I think I know a lot of people who potentially, we could say, have become so habituated to self-neglect. That's what it is, right? I have a feeling, I have an urge, I have a knowing, and then I just neglect it and I run away from it because it doesn't make sense or other people won't understand it or whatever it is. I think a lot of people spend their entire life there. And that is why a lot of people are in chronic pain, for absolute sure. I've seen that so many times. That's why people are so overweight and struggling with eating disorders and so underweight as well. It's also why people are so depressed and anxious and medicated, is because we become really habituated because, again, the systems and organizations that very, very early on start disconnecting us from ourselves. If that becomes where we feel safe, the only way that I know how to relate to myself is to be in denial of what I actually feel. You could spend your entire life there. You could spend your entire life doing what you think you should, doing what other people tell you to do, without ever really getting to know yourself, because it can feel so unsafe. It can feel so foreign and so threatening that we choose not to. But so again, I'm just saying this all because if you notice that there is so much resistance or fear of coming back inside your body, actually feeling safe with yourself, actually feeling into your intuition, that makes sense. That makes sense. I don't think that it's a good enough reason for it to stop you, and we can talk more about that. But I want to validate that there are very good reasons that doing this kind of spiritual journeying work can feel really threatening to your sense of identity. And I will say more about that. All right, so that is that. But there's two other things I want to say about that. Number one is that when we start to, reconnect to ourselves as a spiritual being and our spiritual knowing and sensing, the other thing about that, and the other reason you may consciously or not really want to do that, is because then we're opening ourselves up to the energetic field around us. And that also feels vulnerable. That can feel really risky because now you're tapping into, if you're, and this again, this is my own belief and experience, is if I am tapping into myself and my own energetic field and experience, then I'm also tapping into that of the collective and the environment and other people. If I'm sensing and feeling myself energetically, then I'm sensing and feeling others energetically. And that also, I think there's really a learning curve there about how to move through the world this way and feel protected and feel grounded and feel stable and safe in that. Because at a certain point, it's not just you and it's not just your own energy. And I can come back and say more about how I practice kind of being protected around that. But I just want to voice and acknowledge that there are I don't even want to say downsides, but there are challenges and obstacles that come with this, let's say, spiritual way of living. And I think it's still worth it. But as a mentor of mine once said, new level, new devil. You get to a new level, there's a new devil, right? It's not this like, I'll be happy when, and then all my problems will be solved kind of thing. It's really honestly when you have more connection and access to your intuitive skills and yourself as an intuitive, energetic, spiritual being, there are also, you get to that new level of connection and there are new devils that is like, oh shit, there's all this energy around me that I can feel and tap into. And that can be, that can be a lot to navigate. So if there are, if there are any follow questions about anything, please let me know. But if that's something that you want me to speak more about, I'm happy to do it, but that's not what this episode's supposed to be about. But all of that leads me to the other kind of last component to this is that my theory, my belief is that people who use food to cope and people who use either food to cope with emotion and stress or use a bigger body to feel protected from other people or protected in the world at large. My theory, because again, this is the work that I do with other people professionally, but it's also the life that I've lived personally, is that these people, my people, that includes me, are sometimes the most empathic, the most intuitive, the most energetically attuned people. And because they are so strongly connected, because we are so strongly connected, and because that's a lot to handle and a lot to manage and a lot to figure out and navigate, especially as children, when we are so intuitive and we are so tapped in energetically, and at the same time, things start like diet culture kind of chipping away at our spiritual connection and our spiritual perception of our own selves. My belief is that at this time, when we don't have access to drugs and alcohol and gambling and cigarettes, like myself, we can turn to food for comfort and safety and protection. And so I know I said this somewhere recently, but I was talking about after my weight loss, when 150 pounds came off. And I remember saying to my therapist, when I was going to therapy before my weight loss, I was absolutely convinced that my body, my weight, had nothing to do with my emotional world at all. I would never even have used the word spiritual in my vocabulary at the time. I thought that I just like to eat. That was my understanding of it. But I now understand that I remember going into therapy after my weight came off saying, I feel like my shield of armor is gone. And I remember feeling like I was moving through the world naked and extremely vulnerable, just exposed. I felt like my skin was gone. I felt like I was an open wound walking through the streets all the time. And I have now had about 12 years of living in the world since then, and I've learned how to navigate it without gaining all the weight back. And I'll say more about that. But I think it's, again, I want to share what I've seen over and over and over again is that people will come in similar to me in bigger bodies with all this quote unquote excess weight on their bodies, and a perception that they're not spiritual, they're barely emotional, and they're just, and then we like do this kind of work, put the mind, body, soul system back together, and it's like, oh my God. I remember the episode I did with Nate like a long time ago on this podcast where you like his awakening in us doing work together was like, I actually have feelings, right? And that's where it starts for a lot of people, very, very similar to my own story. And then it becomes, not only do I have emotions, I am a spiritual being. Like there are parts of me that I can't even understand, that I don't even know, that like, and it expands beyond just, oh, I have feelings. But I really do think that if you are someone that struggles with food and eating, particularly overeating from a young age, very much like myself, I think it's quite possible that you actually are so connected, that you are so intuitive and so empathic, and that feels scary, and that feels out of control, and that feels overwhelming. And food and eating can act as not just, this operates in a couple ways. It could be the numbing agent, because again, there's so much energy around you or in you that you don't know how to process or cope with or manage. So food can help you kind of stuff it down and just like suppress it, deny it, numb out from it. And also it can function as, if I eat more, my body gets bigger, and my body can feel like a shield of armor. My body can feel like padding and protection. A body that is quote unquote morbidly obese on the BMI chart can feel like a buffer. And when there's so much happening energetically, intuitively, empathically, and you don't know what to do with that because no one ever taught you ultimately how to use these superpowers that you have, right? These natural instincts, if you don't know what to do with that, it can feel safer and easier to just stuff it down and deny it and ignore it and neglect it. And I definitely think I know that is exactly what it was like for me and has been like for me. But I've also seen this with a lot of my clients as well. And so I just want to throw that out there for anyone that's listening that also kind of feels in a similar boat or could just use this kind of validation and feeling seen. You're not crazy. You're not crazy. You're not wrong. You're not bad. You're not, I don't like this feel like you're not psychotic. If you're not like, there's nothing wrong with you if you're using food, again, the substance on which we survive, that we have access to so early on, to stuff down what feels like an overwhelming amount of energy. And then, you grow up a little bit and you don't even have the concept of yourself as a spiritual being. You're only seeing yourself as a body or an object because of diet culture and other things. So how do you even know? You don't even know. Not only do you not know what to do with it, but you don't even know that it's playing out, right? And so then we just keep eating because that feels safe, because the alternative is what? Is opening ourselves up to the energetic field that we can't even see. Okay, so I don't know. That felt like it needed to be said, maybe just for past versions of myself, but hopefully for you too. And the reason that all of this is coming out now, as I put this together and I'm like reading through my notes, is because I had a really cool, very interesting experience very recently, like literally a few days ago or a couple weeks ago, where I realized that I felt this sense of trust. Now, I'm going to say a lot about trust today because that topic started coming up in the last couple episodes, trust with ourselves, right? But I experienced this moment viscerally of feeling an embodied sense of self-trust specifically in my own strength and in my own ability to protect myself, especially in relation to other people and other energies. And it was really interesting because nothing happened, nothing really like threatened me. I wasn't in danger, I wasn't in harm's way, but I remember feeling, now I'm living in Brooklyn. So it could have been, just something on the street happening or something surprising me that kind of created some fear or something like that. But I just remember feeling this like, I've got you. I've got you. And I felt like I was giving that to myself, but I also felt myself receiving that from myself. Like, I'm going to be okay. I know how to take care of myself, and specifically, I know how to protect myself. And it was coming from this, like, I trust me to protect me. And the reason that felt so important was because it also just, again, spiritual knowing dropped in. That is, I don't need 150 pounds on my body to feel protected. I don't need a physical shield of armor to feel protected. I don't need weight gain and overeating to feel protected. I feel like I know how to protect myself energetically, spiritually, socially. I don't need to gain the weight back to feel a sense of safety. And I thought a lot about this because I kind of felt into it a little bit more because I was fascinated by this. Because again, I didn't feel when I was in a bigger body, I didn't know that it felt so protective. I was so not connected at all to how it was operating on such a deep level. And so I get really fascinated by this when I have moments that bring me back to that. And so what I started feeling into was how and why that was true. Why is it that I feel so trusting of me to protect me? And then I realized that the answer is literally fierce self-compassion. The answer is fierce self-compassion. So what I feel called to do is teach about what that is and what that means and how and why it has transformed my experience of being a spiritual being, having a physical experience, because I'm realizing now that it's like everything. It's the root of it all. And so if we want to feel safe in our bodies, protected without gaining all the weight back, comforted or comfortable without using food to cope, how is it that I've arrived at this place, not just where I've lost the weight and maintained it, and then lost more weight and maintained it, but I feel safe, trusting, protected, guarded, shielded, and also so open-hearted and open-minded and connected and vulnerable and strong. And how is all of this happening? And it all came down to fierce self-compassion. So that's what we need to talk about. Now, I will be honest with you and say what this reminds me of very much is the first time I lost weight. I remember a lot of people asking me, how did you do it? And at a certain point, I remember, and I said this in the first speech I gave in 2014, I remember at a certain point realizing people were not actually asking me how I did it in terms of what I ate or the way that I exercised or anything like that. Because I would say to them, diet and exercise. And it's like, yeah, but how did you do it? Well, I started with Jenny Craig. And no, but how did you do it? I learned after having this conversation a lot of times, what people were actually asking me about was, how did I do it mentally? How did I do it emotionally? And now, 12 years later, I'm realizing what people were asking and are still asking is, how did you do it spiritually? Because again, all of this is the relationship you have with yourself. And that's how I would define spirituality, or at least something that exists in the spiritual realm. So it's not so in me thinking about this, why do I feel so safe and protected and strong and empowered? Well, again, it's not just the things. It's, how am I showing up in my relationship with myself that allows this to happen? And what also is fascinating to me is that it's not just me practicing fierce self-compassion. It is specifically fierce self-compassion from and through with my own intentional weight loss. So it comes back to this whole intentional weight loss being the spiritual journey and this spiritual adventure where I get to heal and improve and strengthen the relationship I have with myself through the commitments I'm making for intentional weight loss that then allow me to feel like I know that I can commit to myself. I know that I can take care of myself. I know that I can protect myself. I know that I am unfuckwithable because of the way that I've shown up to achieve this. And now it's like integrated into my body that I feel so unfuckwithable in the greater context, in the social context. I feel safe and protected because, and I'm gonna get into what fierce self-compassion actually is and how to do it. But the point is that I have become really strong at practicing protecting myself against myself and other parts of me, and comforting me, and showing up in, again, the like masculine energy with me internally, that then it allows me to say I can handle the challenges and obstacles and discomfort of being a spiritual being out here and living in a social context out here. I can handle that because I know what I'm capable of. And the reason I know what I'm capable of is because I've been showing up to honor this commitment over and over again. And that is huge. So that's what I want. That's ultimately what I want to provide a blueprint for, so that you can also essentially lose weight and feel safe losing weight and feel safe keeping it off, because it is possible to do that if you address it on such a deep level. So that's all about fierce self-compassion. Okay, so before we get into fierce self-compassion, we have to back up, because fierce self-compassion is like skipping to chapter 5 of a book when there are very important things that happen in chapters 1 through 4. So I have to go back and share more about self-compassion, because I realize that there is no podcast episode dedicated to this topic yet. And before fierce self-compassion, we have to talk about tender self-compassion, which I also mentioned. So again, I'm going to teach a bunch of things about this so that I can then get into how to integrate it, what it looks like, what it sounds like, and how it can change your whole life. So I'm going to read some of what I share in my group coaching program, what I've shared at some retreats, and then we'll go from there. So the secret sauce, I like to think of self-compassion as the secret sauce, because you can do, quote unquote, all the right things. You can do all of the practices. You can meditate, you can journal, you can go outside and do your exercise. You can do all the things. And if your relationship with yourself is still not compassionate, well, how far are you really going to get, right? If you feel like everywhere you travel, maybe you travel to all the right places, but you're traveling with a bully or an enemy, how can you expect yourself to feel a sense of embodied safety that then is the foundation for transformation internally and externally, right? So to me, it's like the secret sauce, because it's not what you're doing, it's the energy with which you're doing it. So there is a misconception that it is self-indulgent or narcissistic to practice self-kindness. That's a misconception. That's not the truth. Because scientific evidence suggests that it can increase our emotional resilience, it can improve our health, well-being, and productivity. Importantly, it also helps us learn from the mistakes that caused our upset in the first place. It is negatively correlated with reports of depression and anxiety, and positively correlated with general life satisfaction. So what that says is the more you practice self-compassion, the less you will feel symptoms of depression and anxiety, and the more you will experience an improved quality of life and a satisfaction with your life. Okay. Importantly, and there are so many facts and tidbits we could talk about with self-compassion, but I like to focus on these because of the work that I do and the conversation we're having here. Women athletes with higher levels of self-compassion have greater levels of personal growth, body appreciation, purpose in life, and a sense of responsibility, as well as self-acceptance. It was also shown that these same women have lower levels of body anxiety and lower fear of failure, in addition to less fear of negative evaluation. So essentially being judged negatively by other people. Furthermore, self-compassion interventions for eating pathology, so eating disorders, disordered eating, and body image were effective and superior to control groups. So what this means in research language is self-compassion was successful in helping people feel better with eating disorders and body image. Self-compassion appears to be an adaptive emotional regulation strategy in eating disorders and body image. Okay, so the reason that I'm starting here, again, is because before we get to fear self-compassion, we have to talk about tender self-compassion. And before we talk about tender self-compassion, we have to talk about self-compassion in general as a concept. And if there are all of these fears and myths and misconceptions about self-compassion that are getting in the way of you having any relationship with it, well, we have to start there. So notice, okay, what comes up for you when I suggest you be kind to yourself. So there are sometimes fears, right, of like it's narcissistic or self-indulgent, or if I'm kind to myself, then I won't be motivated. If I am nice to myself, then I'll never change anything about myself. And what I'm saying to you very explicitly and very directly these are myths and misconceptions. This is not how it works. Because as we see, not just in my own personal story that I'm sharing, but as we see in the research, because there is now research being done about self-compassion as a practice, right? What we see is that it actually does increase not just health and well-being, but it also increases productivity. So not only do you feel better and feel safer in the life that you're living, but you actually are more likely to change and get shit done that you want to get done. So that's how we have to understand self-compassion as valuable, as the secret sauce that I think a lot of us are really missing, when especially it comes to people who are like, I've been doing all the right things, or I've been at this for so long and I've done so much work. If you are still not compassionate to yourself, that's what we need to pay attention to. So that's what we're paying attention to. So self-compassion is everything. Okay, so now that we have laid that as a foundation, I do also need to insert here. This is not my own original work. This is really coming from Dr. Kristen Neff, who is the one, I call her the queen of self-compassion. I have said that before on this podcast. But she has really operationalized self-compassion. So it's not just like a theory and idea, but there are steps, there are parts, there is a practice to it. There's a way to do it. And that is what the research studies, is her approach to self-compassion. So before, again, we get to fierceness, let's talk about tender self-compassion. and again, this is coming straight from Dr. Kristen Neff's work, the definition of tender self-compassion is accepting ourselves to alleviate suffering. Okay, so this is the part of self-compassion where it's warm and nurturing. You can think of like the quote-unquote divine mother energy. The energy that you want to be met with when you are scared, vulnerable, sad, right? The part that really is willing to comfort us emotionally. So tender self-compassion is about being with ourselves in a compassionate way. And I think one of the most important things to me about self-compassion is actually redefining it or defining it, because we think, for very valid reasons, that self-compassion is being compassionate to the self. Sure, it is that, of course. However, if we look at the actual definition, well, it actually comes from calm, which means with, passion meaning suffering. So the actual definition of self-compassion is how are we with our own suffering? And if, very aligned with everything I was just saying, if when a thought or feeling comes up that is uncomfortable or challenging for you, what you do, like I have spent a lot of my life doing, is pushing it away and denying it and avoiding it and neglecting it, you are not with your own suffering. You are in resistance to being with your own suffering. You are in avoidance. You are in denial. You are repressing. You are not with your own suffering, which actually is to say you're not being compassionate to yourself. You're not practicing self-compassion if what you're doing is turning away from your own pain, right? So that's what we want to pay attention to is, again, you're in a relationship with yourself. And so when you are struggling, when you are emotional, when you are going through it, the question is not how do you get yourself out of pain or how do you get the pain to stop? The question is how can you be with yourself in your own suffering? That is self-compassion. That's presence. That's connection. And very often, this is why I think about it in terms of like inner child and inner parent, is because when the inner child or an actual child is upset, we don't need to take the upset away. The child does not need for upset to be taken away. What they need is an adult presence. What they need is connection to someone that feels safe to them. That's what we need when we're going through it. We don't need to not feel that way. We need to not be alone in feeling that way. And I know I talk about this in a future podcast episode, but I'm saying this now because, again, you want to understand how to access all of this and feel good and at peace and free and alive and all of it. Well, it's a relationship you have with yourself. And part of the relationship you have with yourself, in order to get to all the good stuff, you have to be willing to be with your own suffering. Okay? And the benefit of that, again, is like you're not just sitting in your own shit because you like it or it feels good. No, you're sitting with your own shit because that's how you practice compassion. That's how you build the foundation of a relationship that will then allow you to mobilize and use the energy you have in the way that you want to. So it's not, again, about feeling the feelings just to feel the feelings and then, oh, that's really hard. It's about feeling the feelings and being with yourself in it so that you can come out of it and do more having been deeper connected to yourself. Okay? So the analogy that I love that I've heard Kristen Neff say before is if you're looking for like a blueprint of like how to do this and there's because in some ways it's like, okay, so be kind to yourself and like sit in your own pain, but there's also ways to kind of screw it up. Meaning like if you're such a perfectionist that you're practicing self-compassion, but in such a perfectionistic way, it's still coming from this like energy of fear and scarcity. So you want to pay attention to that. If you're practicing self-compassion, but you are so attached to the outcome of feeling better, like that's not going to be helpful, really. So I think it's helpful to have this analogy that she shares where she says, like, if you, for example, have a dog, because also, I say with self-compassion, if you need help getting there, think about how you would treat or talk to your best friend. And sometimes it's like, oh God, I would never say to my best friend some of the things I say to myself. But another one is animals and pets. So I've noticed a lot of people, when they're being very, very hard on themselves, when I say sometimes the inner child doesn't always resonate, but would you talk to your dog that way? And it's like, oh, no, that would be really mean, right? So Kristen Neff shares this example that let's say you have a dog that gets surgery. And, they tore their ACL and they got surgery to fix it. And now they're wearing the cone around their head and they're just coming home from the vet. You likely find yourself spending more time with your dog and being a little extra nurturing, a little extra loving, tender, right? Maybe you're lying with them and petting them and hanging out with them, and here's the point. You're not doing any of that because you expect them to heal faster. You're not lying with them and petting with them because you think that their surgery recovery will speed up if you do. You're not doing it to get them out of pain. You're doing it because they're in pain. Okay? Let's sit with that for a second. You are not practicing compassion to get them out of pain. You're practicing compassion because they're in pain. And that's what you want to think about when you're thinking about sitting in your own suffering, sitting in your own pain, being willing to feel the hurt and heartache of life. You're not doing it to get it done with or to get it over with or to just move through it. That's how you mess it up, right? You're doing it because you're in pain. And when you're in pain, the only thing worse than being in pain is being alone in pain. And like we've talked about before, trauma is not just what happened to you, it's what happened inside of you. But trauma is not just what happened to you, it's being alone in what happened to you. So you want to talk about reparenting, right? If I use myself as an example again, there was stuff that I went through as a kid where I felt really alone and left behind by the adults. And I also felt alone and left behind by myself because I couldn't be with my pain and suffering. I didn't know how. I didn't have the resources or the tools or the skills or the community or the connection or the support. I didn't know how to do any of that at 5 years old. So I didn't. So I abandoned myself and my own pain and my own suffering. Okay? Now, as an adult, I get to use self-compassion as the way that I reparent myself. And it starts with being willing to feel my feelings, being willing to feel hurt and heartache and grief and loss and pain. It's having, but this willingness to feel what I feel, even when it hurts and even when it's uncomfortable, that's what allows me then to break my heart to save my soul. That's what allows me to keep moving in the direction of alignment, even though sometimes I question or doubt or am scared that I'm doing the wrong thing or I don't know where it's all going or whatever. My willingness to sit with myself in my fear, in my pain, is what creates such a strong connection with me. So maybe other people can abandon me. Maybe other people can leave me. Maybe other people can leave me behind or forget about me the way that it felt like they did in the past. Maybe they can now, but I will not do that to myself anymore. And because I refuse to do that to myself anymore, and I see the way that I am consistently showing up to be where I am, to be in my body, to feel through it, the way that I am the mother to myself that sits with me, not because I'm trying to get me out of pain, but because I'm in pain, now I can do the things I want to do. Now I can again use this energy to move into fierce self-compassion, which is taking action and being aligned in my action. But we're not there yet, because the tenderness is a prerequisite. You cannot jump to fierce self-compassion if you're not already embodied in tender self-compassion. So accepting ourselves and accepting our own pain, that's first. That's step one. That's what we're talking about now. Okay, so this tender self-compassion is what allows us to heal on many levels, reconnect with ourselves. And the way to do it, I'm gonna go through some of the steps and what this actually looks like. But you want to think about it as when the intervention we need when we are human. And I use human. I love the way that we use the word human as synonymous with imperfect and messy, right? When I say to you, like, you're only human, or I'm just a human, or whatever, off the bat what I'm saying is it's not perfect out here. So when you make mistakes, when you fuck it up, when you are imperfect, okay, this is the practice where you get to say, this hurts. This is hard. This is hard. I made a mistake and I feel bad about it. Or I regret that thing I did. That doesn't feel very good to me. It's just being willing to say, this hurts. And sometimes it's hard. And the reason that it can be so powerful and healing is because what we're doing is embodying the energy of, you can make a mistake and still be loved. You can be imperfect and still be accepted unconditionally. You are still, right? Okay? You want to feel like you're worthy of love, no matter what you look like, no matter what size you're in, no matter what body you're in. You can practice that. You can practice that right here, right now. There's nothing in the way of you practicing self-compassion. That's the thing about the relationship with yourself. There's nothing getting in the way. So that's what you want to think of it as just this, like, it's okay. I don't know how often I'm just telling myself those two words. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay that you did this. It's okay that it went that way. It's okay that you feel this way. It's okay that you're thinking that. It's okay that you had this belief. It's okay. It's okay. You're okay. And that energy is love. That energy is safety. It's okay. So when you are moving through pain, heartache, loss, grief, or reflecting on the ways that you're not proud of yourself, can you just be with it? Can you just sit with, okay, this hurts. This is suffering. This is being messy. I don't like this. Okay. But can you just be with it? Because you being with it is self-compassion. And this is, again, the energy of, I'm here for you. I'm here with you. You're not alone in this. And that's what to me, I think that's the most important seed I can plant around this, is that you are just willing to not abandon yourself in pain the way that you've probably been doing your entire life. If the only way that you've ever known how to feel heartache or go through struggle is to eat about it or lie about it or smoke about it or drink about it or shop about it, or if all you've ever known how to do is manage and control, this is going to confront that. And so, again, it's not always easy and comfortable, but you don't want to think about like solving the problem or figuring out what to do or any of that stuff. It's just imagine giving yourself that which you could have, should have, wanted to, needed to receive from an adult. And now we get to do that for ourselves. This is the genesis of reparenting to me in so many ways. And again, the last thing I'll say is it's very much like parenting and soothing a child. I think soothing is a really great word here, not because, again, you're soothing to get out of pain. You're soothing because you're in pain and the willingness to be with that. So How do we do it? How do you actually practice this? Well, the first thing I'll point you to is you can go to Kristen Neff's website. I don't remember exactly what it is. Something about the Institute for Self-Compassion, but I think she just renamed it potentially. Google it. Google her name. Kristen Neff, Self-Compassion. It'll take you to the right place. She has some free resources on there. So you want to dive into this, please do. I also have a meditation library on my own website. Some of them are self-compassion related. And so first I will point you there to her. But I'm going to say a little bit about how to do the tender self-compassion practice so you have something to come back to and hold on to, because this is the foundation for everything that's coming. So the first step, there are 3 steps. The first step of the self-compassion practice, or she calls it the self-compassion break, is mindfulness. So mindfulness is what it sounds like. The first step of mindfulness is presence. And what you're doing there is just, again, bringing the awareness to, this is a moment of suffering. This hurts. I am feeling pain. Maybe even this is hard to feel. Whatever it is, what you're doing is you're practicing mindfulness, which can be life-changing. It can be absolutely shifting if, again, your habit or your way of being, especially when it comes to your own pain, suffering, and discomfort, is to not be mindful of it and just push it aside as though it's not happening. It can be wildly altering for your system, for you to practice this one step of, actually, I'm in pain, right? Like, in so much of my own story was just about being willing to say, actually, I'm not fine. Actually, I do care. Actually, I am kind of hurt. Actually, I am uncomfortable. Actually, I don't agree, right? Like, just that moment of, wait, I am feeling something. I am having a moment of suffering. Actually, this is hard. That's the first step. And so, again, on the surface, it's like, oh, okay, I would have been judgmental about something like this. Like, okay, just like be aware of the fact that it hurts. Like, what's that going to do? But that's how it starts, because, again, what you're shifting out of is the habit of not being willing to tell the truth about that. So the first step is mindfulness. You're bringing presence into your experience and saying, this hurts. This hurts. Okay. Now, once you've done that, it can be helpful as part of number 1, to use the feelings wheel or something like that to help you just identify. But here, again, it's like you don't want to get too heady about this. You don't want to get too intellectual about it. If pulling out the feelings wheel gets you back in your head and you're like, I don't know if it's the right word, throw it out. Don't do it. But it can be helpful in this first part to actually be curious about what emotions you're feeling. What are you actually feeling? This is a moment of suffering. This is a moment of pain. What are you feeling? Could be shame, could be fear, could be anxiety, could be judgment of myself, could be, right, whatever it is. But it can be helpful to just start identifying, like, this is what I'm actually experiencing. Okay. And then once you've done that, so now I'm breaking it into like 1A, mindfulness. 1B, what feeling is it? What emotions are coming up? 1C, where do you feel this energy in your body? So maybe you identify, I feel sad. What does sadness feel like? Maybe you identify, I feel really anxious or scared. Okay, where is that energy? What does it feel like to you? What are the sensations in your body that are associated with that feeling? Tightness, clenching, tingling, holding your breath, right? All the kind of fight or flight things that start happening as well. This is where you can start to notice that, because your mindfulness is not just, this is a moment of suffering, and it's not just, I'm feeling anxiety. It can also be mindful, I'm feeling anxiety, and that is showing up as tingling in my hands, or a pit in my stomach, or butterflies in my belly, right? It can show up a lot of different ways, but all of that can be part of the first step of just, again, bringing awareness to your own lived experience of whatever it is you're going through. So that's the first step. Mindfulness. Now, number 2 is what she calls shared humanity. And the energy of this is ultimately connection and feeling connected, being connected, reminding yourself you are connected. And what this can sound like is shared humanity is this is normal. This is part of life. I usually, when I'm practicing this is where I say to myself, this is not your fault. You didn't ask for this. You didn't design this. You don't want this, right? This is not your fault. You are not alone in this human experience. Other people have experienced this. Other people will experience this. This is you being human. Suffering is a part of the human experience. Feeling pain is part of being human. You know that when it comes to other people, you can say, this is just part of being a human. Sometimes it hurts, sometimes it's hard, right? We have a kind of normalized perception that is, yeah, okay, you go through heartache sometimes. Sometimes you feel uncomfortable. But then as soon as it's us, right, it's like, what am I doing wrong? I must be broken. I'm the problem. And it's like, no. This is you being human. And moving into that second step of self-compassion that just is shared humanity is just to say, you're connecting to your human experience. And sometimes it's hard and it's okay. It doesn't mean anything about you. And just, you can hang out here. It is safe for you to have this experience. You are not alone. You are one of the human family. And this is one of those things that connects you to that. This is your humanity. And that's where you can feel, again, just not alone. And remind yourself that you are connected to the great, the collective. And in that, there is some exhale and relief, right? You're not existing in a vacuum, and you're not an island. Here you are feeling sadness the way other humans do. Here you are feeling pain and fear and anxiety and loss and grief the way all humans do, if we're telling the truth. Okay, so that's number 2. So you start with mindfulness, becoming aware, and then you move into your shared humanity. And then the third part of self-compassion, or the self-compassion break, is kindness. So this is the energy of being loving. And ultimately, this is where you get to actually practice what you probably think self-compassion is, which is being kind to yourself. And so that's where it can be helpful to say, if this were your best friend, what would you say to them? If someone you love was going through this, what would you say to them? And sometimes that sounds like, I'm here for you. Or, again, it's okay. It's not your fault. And sometimes I think about, for me personally, I think about what Brene Brown, I think, will talk about in terms of the second wound, right? The first wound is the anxiety. The first wound is the fear. The first wound is the sadness, the heartache, the grief, the loss. That's the first wound, because that's just the wound of being human, right? That's what happens when you're living with an open heart. You're going to get wounded. That's the first wound. But the second wound we inflict upon ourselves. The second wound is judging yourself for your anxiety. You can't stop the anxiety, but you can stop the judgment, right? It's a second wound. The second wound is being mean to yourself about feeling sad. You can't do anything about the sadness, but you can stop being mean to yourself about feeling it. So to me, the third part of tender self-compassion is removing the second wound that you are inflicting upon yourself with your own judgment or shame or criticism or whatever it is. And this is where, for me, again, sometimes, what does it look like or sound like for me to be kind and compassionate to myself? Ultimately, it means just get off my own back. And sometimes, especially if you're just starting with a self-compassion practice and it's like, this feels so foreign, which also, by the way, is super valid and happens sometimes. If you find that to be the case, instead of how do I be kind to myself, I find it helpful to be like, how do I be less mean to myself? What does it look like to potentially just get off my own back a little bit? And that is inching toward, that is being kind to myself, is being less mean to myself. And sometimes that kind of unlocks this practice for some people. But that's the third part, okay? And so in all of this, you can start to probably see you're not doing a self-compassion break to get rid of your pain. A self-compassion break is about sitting in it. And then the great irony is that you do stuff like this, where, okay, now, yeah, you still might be in some pain. You might still be having the human experience, but, it feels so much better. And I remember one time when I led this at a retreat, and it was to a crowd that was really not familiar with self-compassion very much. And I just remember one of the guys in the audience saying to me, what did he say? He said something like, I still don't feel good about what I did, but now I don't feel like I have to beat myself up for it. And it's like that's what it feels and sounds like when you're being a human. You're not always going to love the thing you did. You're not always going to get out of pain, but you can stop beating yourself up for it and making it worse. You can stop getting in your own way. And that's what this is ultimately all about, is you want to take action. You want to align your life. You want to feel good in your skin. You want to heal your relationship with food. You want to do all of this. If you are still getting in your own way, you're still getting in your own way. And the really great news about self-compassion is you no longer have to. This is just what you have to practice. So you can actually remove the second wound, learn how to practice tolerating the first wound, because those aren't going anywhere. And then you take your power back and you can do what you want with it. So that is what I want to leave you with today. This is your optional homework assignment. Practice self-compassion when you are finding yourself kind of going through it or having a tough time. It could be something, and you can practice this just on yourself right now. You can think of something kind of minor. Start with something minor. Don't like overdo it and re-traumatize yourself around any of this. That's also not helpful. Think of something like a 3 or 4 out of 10 on the scale of emotionally uncomfortable. But you can start with thinking of something like that's kind of just bothering you a little bit or stressing you out a little bit or making you feel some emotional discomfort to some degree. And feel. Start with that. Start with feeling. What does it bring up in you? What are the thoughts and the feelings and the experience? Where do you find them in your body? And practice this. Like, ooh, this is hard. And I don't have to make it less hard. I can tolerate this feeling by just being with myself in it. And breathe through it. Stay with your breath. Stay in your body. And then really intentionally be kind to yourself. What do you need to hear? What do you need to say to yourself? What do you need to allow for yourself? How do you bring yourself some kindness and care and tenderness and love, not to get rid of your pain, but because you're in pain? That's the practice. So if this is new to you, again, I also want to say it's very normal to hear some of this and immediately reject it or feel very resistant of it, feel like disgusted by it potentially. There's a lot of reactions that are very normal and valid because especially if you grew up in a family or a home or with parents that were abusive or hurtful, neglectful, again, we will always choose the familiar hell over the unfamiliar heaven. So if self-compassion is an unfamiliar heaven, you have to know that you're likely going to choose your familiar hell over this. And so any of the resistance you have, any of the disgust, any of the parts of you that are showing up that are like absolutely not, or if you find yourself trying to practice this and it just feels like way too overwhelming, or like really overstimulating or what, it can really create some very strong reactions in people, like trauma response kind of reactions. And that's where I want to also remind you, you know yourself best. And sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do with self-compassion is stop practicing, right? You still want to meet yourself where you are. You still want to take baby steps. You still want to practice the discipline of doing less, right? So this is not a practice that is going to happen overnight. It's not something that's going to necessarily feel familiar and safe overnight, nor should it. So I'm saying all of this. I'm teaching you how to be self-compassionate, but part of that is also if it's too far out of your current window of tolerance, if it is so far away from what you're used to and familiar with, we have to know that going into it. Right? We have to realistic expectations of how this practice will go. And so again, just be mindful to meet yourself where you are, not where you want to be, not where you think you should be, not where other people are, where you are with this practice. And we'll start there. Okay, so as always, I'm going to just say this again. I'm going to say this every episode. If you have follow-up questions, if there's any of this you want me to talk more about or elaborate on, I really am here to teach you how to do this. So please feel free to ask. LisaSchlossberg@gmail.com or Lisa.Schlossberg on Instagram. You can DM me, because where we're going with this is, first we have to talk about tender self-compassion, which we're doing. Then we're going to talk about fierce self-compassion. Then we're going to talk about what it looks like for those to be integrated together, so you can accept yourself to alleviate suffering, but you can also take action to alleviate suffering. And then that's a lot of suffering being alleviated. So that is how you arrive at a phenomenal day after, one after the other. That's what we're going for. So, wow, it's 11:11 right now. So that means that that's the end of the podcast. All right, so that's where we're going. Consider this, I guess, chapter 1 of however many chapters there are going to be of all of this stuff that I want to teach you and say to you. All right, I hope you enjoy. I hope it resonates. I really love you a lot. And I'm just going to remind you again, if this is the kind of stuff that is resonating with you, that you want some more of, this is what one-on-one coaching is for moving into 2026. So that is the last plug. I hope you have the most amazing day and everything, and I will see you next time.